Hola, Mexico City.
Hola, Mexico City.
Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Yo me llamo Frank Castronovo y este es mi amigo y colaborador, Frank Falcinelli.
Buenos días. Queremos agradecerle a Enrique Olvera la oportunidad de estar aquí con ustedes. Gracias.
Now you make it easy for us, if you allow us in English. Frank and I both come from New York City, where we own and operate 3 restaurants and a coffee shop. In 2004, we opened our first restaurant together, Frankies Spuntino, in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn. In the years following that, we opened Cafe Peddler in Cobble Hill and Prime Meats, a German-American garden-to-guest tavern next to our original business. And most recently, we opened a Manhattan location of Frankies in Greenwich Village. It's a real pleasure to be here in Mexico, and we'd like to tell you right from the start that if it weren't for Latin Americans, and most of them Mexicans, we wouldn't be able to run our restaurants. From the day we opened our first place, they've been the backbone and the lifeblood of our businesses. And I don't think any restaurateur or chef in the United States could tell you anything different.
This is the first time Frank and I have presented at a gastronomic conference. And honestly, we're really honored to be participating in Mesamérica with all the talented chefs and presenters. This morning, Frank and I are not going to demo dishes or try to talk about the cutting edge of cuisine. Instead, we like to share our story and discuss what hospitality, consistency, quality, value, and most importantly to us, contribution to community mean to us. Let's begin with where we came from. My partner and I are both from Italian heritage. We grew up together as friends in Queens Village, New York during the 70s and 80s, and coincidentally, as you probably can already tell, we're both named Frank. And our fathers too are both named Frank.
In the middle of the 1980s, Frank and I set off separately to work in great classic kitchens. Like many young chefs of that era, we went the traditional French route. On my end, I started my professional career at Manhattan's Russian Tea Room under Jacques Papin. And later on, I went to stage at Paul Bocuse in Lyon, France, where I learned the fundamentals of classic French cuisine and also the basis of earnest hospitality. From there, I came back to New York to work alongside David Boulay at Boulay Restaurant in Manhattan. In the years that would follow, this foundation allowed me to travel and work throughout Europe, Southeast Asia, and many other places to learn my craft. Eventually, I wound up where I began, back home in New York City.
As for myself, I got my start as a dishwasher at a local delicatessen in Queens. I then went to the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York, and like most young cooks, I had the yearning to experience and learn more. That led me to the southwest of France, staging for André Dagon and Auch at the Hotel de France, and then later at Dominique Toulouse, Jardin de l'Opéra. Back in New York, I joined the teams of the River Cafe and Oriole with David Burke and Charlie Palmer. This was a time when new American cuisine was born. Even though Frank C. and I didn't keep in touch, we were following a very similar path. It was almost exactly the same path. Those kinds of projects continued into the 2000s, past 9/11, until 2003, when I ran into Frank C. for the first time since 1985. I'm going to let him tell that story.
It's a long story, but basically, I was on a random street in Greenwich Village, and the police pulled me over for some routine thing, you know, like the federales do here in Mexico. They didn't find anything when they searched my car, but at one point I looked over at a window from the building on the block and saw a man sitting there. The eyes gave it away immediately. It was Falcinelli. It took a couple of yells to get his attention, but eventually I did, and we got to talking. Over the next few weeks and months, we hung out and realized that we had spent 2 decades learning and cooking great food, but we hadn't yet connected with our heritage and with the food we grew up eating. We agreed that we wanted to do something that was a departure from the food of restaurants and a return to making food and things of the people. We wanted to create an experience closer to real life, our grandparents' lives, our parents' lives, and our lives. This was more important to us at the time than reviews or stars.
The timing was right for that realization. I was already working on getting a space on a quiet stretch of the traditionally Italian neighborhood of Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn. It even had an amazing outdoor space. Frank and I quickly decided that we would go into business together, and soon after that, Frankies 457 Spuntino was born.
The idea for Frankies Spuntino was simple. We had grown up eating at home practically every night, watching our grandmothers wake up at 5 in the morning on Sundays to prepare home-cooked Italian meals for the entire family. These dinners were much more than just sustenance. The family would get together and everyone would contribute in some way to the big production, like in Mexico. These were warm communal gatherings where both the food and the sense of hospitality were grounded in honesty. We wanted to bring that vibe and those memories into a restaurant at a time when people really weren't eating at home. Also at this time, you could say that high quality, casual, and affordable dining was still not the main trend in New York. We also didn't want to have a restaurant that felt ironic. You'll see a lot of cartoonish versions of Italian-American restaurants in the United States where Frank Sinatra is playing on the speakers and there are red checker tablecloths and posters of The Godfather on the walls. That's exactly what we didn't want. Frank and I decided we would make a simple, inviting dining room out of real materials, in real proportions, with real lighting. There was already a beautiful entrance with a glass storefront that fogs up mysteriously and romantically in the colder months of the year, a tin ceiling, and a backyard we knew was going to be beautiful and right for outdoor dining and bonfires. You walk in, and the room, either enhanced by sunlight during the day or candles at night, looks almost like an old bar or someone's home more than it does a fancy restaurant. And the music's not Frank Sinatra. It's Bob Dylan, it's the band, it's Neil Young, and it's the Grateful Dead, what we both fell in love with and still listen to today. These, in a lot of ways, are the bands we like to emulate with our food and restaurants, based strong in technique without being pretentious, centered around community, informality, and the idea of favoring a good vibe.
So in a nutshell, our goal in creating Frankies was to make a restaurant that reflected who we are and was the best neighborhood restaurant we could create from the sum of our experiences, our travels, and our heritage. Now that Frankies has been around for close to 10 years, we would like to share with you a few things we feel have to be in place to make a successful neighborhood restaurant. Number one, accessibility. Customers have to be able to count on the restaurant to be open almost all the time, like we are at Frankies. Doing this was a departure from a lot of places we worked in coming up. Number two, sense of kindness. Customers have to be able to count on the restaurant to have a staff that is informal, kind, and anything but arrogant. At the same time, these people have to be as knowledgeable and skilled as those who work at the four-star restaurants. Number three, hospitality. Customers have to be able to count on receiving authentic hospitality. It's not just about shaking a diner's hand when they walk in the door or sending them a drink once in a while. It's about getting to know the diners, genuinely wanting to please them, and having them understand that even though you're running a business, you're in this line of work because you love it, and most of all, you love sharing it with people. Number four, value. This is the thing that underpins all of this, which we'd like to emphasize for the aspiring young chefs and restaurateurs here today. It's the belief that you can provide the highest quality of the level of service, level of quality, without having to charge the highest prices. You can take pride in a restaurant that doesn't have tablecloths or aspire to 3 Michelin stars, but where you use your skills to serve a community and make people happy. We strive to be more like Levi's and Prada. Great quality, integrity, value, and worn every day. In other words, the restaurant can practically fit any occasion. Number five, quality. You have to have good food. At Frankies, we take dishes from the Italian-American canon and try to lighten them up a little bit. Frank and I opened the restaurant when we were practicing a lot of healthful cooking, and it's still that way today. Number six, authenticity. We wanted to reinterpret our grandparents' food, so our food had to fit the time, but was unmistakably grounded in tradition. We wanted grandma flavor without grandma heart attack. So we have meatballs, pork brujol, gnocchi marinara with clams, but we're just as proud, if not more, than the surprising amount of vegetable-centric items and salads on the menu. The garden is a crucial part of what we do. Our goal was to have the sum of these points add up to a sense of community.
Okay. The food is simple. As young chefs, we learned how to pull off complex dishes, but we learned as we got older that it can be just as satisfying to pare things down and keep them simple. From the beginning, we wanted to fly under the radar and maintain a local restaurant close to our homes so we could spend time with our families. But people began noticing what we were doing. During a time when great chefs in New York started opening more and more casual restaurants, we somehow became part of all that. And even though our neighborhood restaurant remained a neighborhood restaurant to the core, diners started coming from all over the world. A few years in, we started thinking about how we could evolve and do something new while sticking to our aesthetic, our ideas, and our values. We didn't have to go very far. We took over a space on the corner of the same block Frankies is on and opened Prime Meats, a German-American tavern. Prime Meats was about creating a restaurant that was part German beer hall, part classic New York tavern. The feel of the place is grounded in those great traditions, but we didn't try to adapt it to the neighborhood, to the community, while providing surprising value and bringing something new to those genres. So today we talked a lot about creating restaurants that operate at a high level but serve a community. We've talked about the way that we might be considered a modern version of the Italian grandma because we're trying to nurture and bring comfort to people. But now we'd like to talk about community in a larger sense of the word, which is something we've been thinking about a lot recently.
Frank and I have spent the last 30 years each in the restaurant business. And in the past 5 years, Frank and I have been lucky enough to travel abroad and meet some of the greatest chefs and other food service players that we greatly admire. We've had breathtaking meals at Mugarit's and Arpege. We've been to both Rene Redzepi's MAD conferences. We've eaten and had plenty to drink with talented and kind people we may not have encountered had it not been for these gastronomic events. We've seen firsthand how culinary gatherings like this one can strengthen the global community of chefs and restaurateurs. So we asked ourselves, how can we be part of this? How can we contribute on a larger level to the culinary community in New York and abroad? And our answer to that question is Res. Res is an artist residency for chefs, a non-commercial environment where chefs from around the world can present their work, their very best work, to the audience of New York without being rushed or stressed. All too often, chefs who travel for collaborative dinners and other events are rushed, short on money, and unable to fully showcase their talents. At Res, we hope to change that. Res is located on the historic Brooklyn waterfront, basically looking the Statue of Liberty right in the eye, right across the river from Manhattan. There, we can host collaborative dinners, one-off events, or installations, and the chefs can stay at Res while they present their work free of charge. It's a place where chefs can present their work exactly how they want it to be while exploring the city, meeting colleagues, and working on their repertoire. At Res, we have a cold kitchen, a hot kitchen, and an outdoor fire kitchen. The dining area is in a big, beautiful garden with a large Canadian lodging tent. Res is meant to be a creative space without the constraints of a running restaurant's day-to-day operations, which can often take a chef away from coming up with ideas and working on their food.
Res is meant to be a creative space without the constraints. That's what you said already. Res is set to open in a few short weeks, but it's designed as a work in progress that will change as the months and years go by. We know one thing though, we want to contribute to our community of chefs, to our peers, and continue to make the world a bit smaller for those who love this profession. Well, that's about it. We'd like to thank you for listening and giving us the chance to tell you a bit about who we are. We would also like to invite you to visit us at one of our locations. Go Brooklyn!
And we do look forward to seeing you in Brooklyn and invite you to come to Res either as a guest or as a chef in residence. Muchas gracias.